Life in the US is one of the largest pro-life marches in the world, and it has inspired pro-lifers everywhere from Poland to Peru to come out in great numbers to stand for life and be united for life. I'm delighted today to have Jeanne Monaghan Mancini, the president of March for Life USA, join us. Jeanne, you're very welcome.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. What an honor to be celebrating with you. Such an interesting moment in our country.
It is indeed. Can you talk to us about the March for Life and why it's so important and how it empowers and inspires people?
Absolutely. So the March for Life in Washington, D.C. was the first of all of the marches around the world. It began in 1974. So this year we'll march for the 48th March for Life. It's hard to believe. And, you know, when it began, the other side thought that we would become desensitized to abortion, essentially. And never did they imagine that this would go on so long in the United States, nor did they imagine that this would become literally the world's largest human rights demonstration, peaceful human rights demonstration. And so it is critical that we march. And sometimes I'm asked by people, you know, why is it important to march? Because isn't it more important, you know, just to pray about this or just to help pregnancy care centers, et cetera? That's really, you know, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And yet I would offer we absolutely have to march every single year because it draws a line in the sand on this human rights issue. And not only that, but you know, the march is covered by a lot of media, and you never know who's watching, whose heart can change because of one of these things. Maybe someone who's been impacted by a choice that they've made in their past, and they hear the voice of love and the voice of mercy, you know, through this. Also, I would say, too, that we've seen things change in the United States from when our terrible Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, came down, legalizing abortion in all of our states. And today, thankfully, our abortion rate is the very lowest that it's ever been in this country. That's why we march, to get it lower and lower, and one day unthinkable. And whereas in the late 1980s, there were maybe 500 pregnancy care centers around our country, and about 2,000 abortion clinics. Now that number is reversed. And perhaps most importantly, we know we're changing hearts and minds, because when you gauge public opinion on this, and particularly young demographics, they are more and more pro-life. In fact, the youngest demographic in our longitudinal general social survey here in the US, it's a government-wide social science test, essentially, that compiles data. It shows that young people, that cohort, are the single most pro-life group that there is out there. And they're also the group that's changed the most over the last 45 years or so. So we know that we're doing a good job, so to speak, and yet, you know, we certainly have our work cut out for us with almost 1 million abortions in our country every single year.
Yes, with some very encouraging and positive statistics from you there. Incredible news that the number of crisis pregnancy care centres is now vastly outnumbering the number of abortion clinics. That's incredible news. And I know that when you look at the photos from the March for Life in the US, it's full of young people, it's full of energy and colour. And we see the same thing here in Ireland, young people coming to the fore. And our theme this year is to be united for life. And I think that's a really important factor in our marches and our rallies, that we come together to be inspired, to be motivated, and then I think to go home very often with what we've learned from the rally, from a speaker or from an information stand or from a conference or an event, to go back to our own areas, to join local pro-life groups, perhaps to join political parties, to become part of crisis pregnancy counselling, and to keep rebuilding the culture.
Couldn't agree more. If people come to the March for Life and have a really excellent, one day there, and they're very motivated, but they don't go home and make a difference in their local communities, I would say we haven't really done our job very well at the March for Life. So the truth of the matter is, we will build a culture of life worldwide if everybody responds to the call in their heart. And I am 100% convinced that every single one of us is called to build a culture of life. And that may be in different ways. Maybe it's writing an opinion piece into your local newspaper. Maybe it's running for school office or some other political office. Maybe it's praying outside of abortion clinics. Maybe it's becoming a pro-life attorney. I don't know. But if you look deep in your heart, everyone that's watching this knows that they have something to give, and that, sacrifice begets fruit. A few years ago, our theme for the March for Life was love saves lives. And I believe, to the extent that we give, sacrificially and respond to those calls in our heart, we will be successful in building a culture of life. But it's going to take all of us together, as you say, united.
Yeah, and I think the marches are a huge witness to that. They're a huge witness for life, that we stand for life. Whatever comes our way, we will continue to stand for life and to be a voice for mother and for baby. You have an election coming up, Jeanne, in November 2020. I know you've had some really good pro-life gains in recent years, but you've just had a loss in the Supreme Court. Can you tell us how that might impact on the election?
Yeah, so just this week, we've gotten devastating news, really, from the Supreme Court, and we were so hopeful with our makeup of justices now. And so sadly, abortion clinics have been given a pass in terms of health regulation. So if somebody in the US is going to get a tooth extracted or a colonoscopy or some sort of LASIK surgery, those clinics will have much higher health regulations than an abortion center here in the United States. So it's horrific that happened. But I will say that Supreme Court bad decisions motivate voters because our voters know, and even in the last election in 2016, something like 6 out of 10 Trump supporters were voting just because of the Supreme Court. And 1 out of 5 voters, regardless of who they voted for, voted primarily because of the Supreme Court. So it's the single biggest influential factor in elections in the United States. And, maybe the Supreme Court thinks it was a good decision that came down yesterday, but I think voters will let them know how they feel in November.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much to the March for Life US for being, I think, a huge inspiration to other countries. Thank you for being a witness always for life. It was absolutely great to talk to you today. Thank you so much, Jeanne.
Oh, thank you, Neve. It's just such an honor to be with you. I just love Ireland so much, and I pray that you have a beautiful March.